So everybody has these two handouts, I believe. Amy and I have been working at compiling some of the data for the 2012-2013 school year. And tonight we're hoping to analyze the data with you, taking a look at some of the more important aspects at this point, the current practices that we're employing here in the building, and what we can do to implement some of those improvements. So kind of my portion of this, with my goals, is to analyze that data from the school report card, understand some of the weaknesses that we've been facing as a school, and I'm referring to an elementary school, share some of the current practices and strategies that we are utilizing at this point, as well as recommend some strategies and programs that we might be able to put into place, or we already have in place for improvement. So what is the school report card? I didn't invent this, and Amy didn't either. We got this right off the website. The purpose of the school report card is to share learning standards for all students, as well as provide information to the public. This isn't anything that we keep private. Everybody knows that. It's out there for anyone to share. In fact, when I pulled out the report card, I went to the public domain. And other measures of our school and district performance. And finally is to take a look at the school report card to help us identify some of those weaknesses as well as the strengths, and how we can improve the instruction. So one of the things that we can do, and I'll take you to this if it'll work. Earlier tonight it was pretty slow when I took a look at it. I'll take you to the website, but what I've done already is go ahead to this. I photocopied for you this, just in case it doesn't come up. This is really what we want to look at. This is the 3 through 6 ELA and math. So taking a look at it, I'm going to try to bring that up. Easy. I had its names earlier. If you look at the data on this particular sheet, and looking primarily at the lighter blue on the left, and the third piece of the graph, which is the purple, you can see our district, and that's our elementary, third grade English language arts, as compared to statewide scores. And if you look across that first initial graph, you can see pretty much that we were heavy in the 1s and 2s, which I think we're all aware at this point is not a passing score. And if you look at the 3s and 4s, looking at that first bar, we had 3% of our students scoring at a passing grade, a 3 or a 4. So that was just third grade. What I did then is to take that data, and if you look at the other piece of the puzzle, not only to compare where we stand as third graders on our ELA across the state, but where we stand in St. Lawrence County. And looking across this at the third grade ELA, you can see that we didn't score all that well. Percent passing is just the 3s and 4s. And as you move throughout, it's kind of the same story. Grade 4 ELA, again, on the back side, the first color copy. Primarily our scores were 1 and 2. With just a small portion of our students scoring at 3 and 4. And then taking a look at the second document again, you can see the grade 4 ELA. .5% of our students were 3 or 4 at the passing level. And the story goes on. And it's pretty much true for the math as well. And not to talk gloom and doom, but to be honest in looking at our scores. If you scoop back in the colored copy again and find grade 3 math, same kind of bar arrangement in the graph. With most of our students scoring 1s and 2s. But what you will see is, and looking at this document as well, that it's not consistently in an improvement from 3 to 6, but over the past few years, when we look at the documents, we really do improve from 3 through 6. Our students come in and they score low at the 3rd grade level. And usually by the time we're 6th grade, even by the time we're up to 8, our students have improved substantially. Looking at the math, it's kind of the same picture again, but you can see that there are gains all the way up through 3 through 6.
So that classroom that you started at pre-K level between that and 1st grade, that's going to help on this one.
That's one of our hopes, yes.
Okay.
One interesting thing that I did notice too was when you go ahead and when you take some time to just kind of peruse the documents, the 4th graders that took this exam in 2012, 2013, and I can't remember the exact number, I pulled it up, but they scored poorly overall. But yet, the year prior to that, they scored it somewhat around 50% passing. So what does that tell us? It tells us a few things, but one of those is the test design has changed over the years, and we all know that. It's not been consistent from year to year. It's like comparing apples to oranges. And again, this year, same thing. This year was our first year implementing the Common Core. So what it'll look like, we can't even really guess. That's going to be one of those things that we're just going to have to wait and see, I think. But at the time of this testing, some of the needs or weaknesses that we had was a vertically aligned, vertically being, from our lower grades all the way up through ELA curriculum. That's probably one of our, has been in the past, a weak area. We don't always know what one classroom is teaching. The standards are there, but it's not always a done deal that a particular standard is being addressed. And sometimes we have a standard that's addressed over and over and over again, maybe doesn't need to be. So that's been a concern. Horizontally aligned curriculum in ELA, just across the grade level itself. There's nothing saying that the teacher next door is teaching exactly like you're teaching, and even teaching the same curriculum. Because we've been allowed, which is a good thing in many ways, to create thematic units and utilize different instructional materials. We've had freedom, but it also has led to some lack of horizontal alignment. And even early intervention through the use of data. We've done it, but it's been more reserved for the AIS teachers. They collect that data, they do share it out with the teachers, maybe not as consistently as it should be, and nobody's fault. It's one of those things, it's time. Usually it's the biggest concern. And continuity. Continuity in the curriculum areas has been a concern, as well as, quite frankly, with the exception of Sue, there's been a lot of change in the elementary, and sometimes a program gets started and doesn't see itself to fruition. Differentiated instruction, we had it, but it wasn't being implemented at every grade level, and it wasn't consistent. And test design mentioned. So what are we currently doing? What are the current strategies and strengths? We have our pre-K. We have data analysis that's being implemented at all grade levels. We use our DIBELS, which is fluency, some other diagnostic parts to it. STAR, we use running records. We have implementation of the Common Core modules and the core knowledge skill strands in ELA and math, which has led to alignment, hopefully, in all of those areas, the ELA and math, both vertically and horizontally. I now know what they're teaching in 2nd grade, or 3rd grade, or 4th grade, as well as what my neighbor is teaching. So, a nice advantage. Are there some concerns with the modules? Yeah, there are, but there's concerns with a lot of things. And over time, hopefully, some of those little bugs will be worked out. And differentiated instruction was implemented a couple of years ago, actually through our youth literacy coach, specialist, Trina Griswold. And she began that implementation, along with Amy Lamity, of the differentiated instruction in Daily 5, which got off its feet in the year 2012, 2013, and hopefully next year we implement it a lot much more. So what do? What are some of those strategies that we're using? What can we continue to do to grow and to make those improvements or those gains? The Transitional First has a great potential here to help catch some of those students before they make it to a point where it might be too far to maybe address some of the needs. Moving forward with the continued implementation of differentiated instruction in both ELA and math. And one of the things I didn't mention back on the other slide, even though in 2012 we were still using Saxon Math. Saxon Math had its time when it really was a strength. It was powerful. It gave us that aligned curriculum, but a couple of years ago we realized that the Saxon Math just wasn't cutting it anymore. It wasn't fulfilling the needs of the Common Core, the rigors of the Common Core, so it kind of created a little bit of a hole in our math curriculum. Some people went to Envision. Even last year, some people started to implement the modules. It was just a time of turmoil, really, with our math. So hopefully, by continuing with the modules in math, we'll see some of that growth and some of that improvement. So overall, I think that the teachers at this point, from what I've heard, are feeling really good about the math modules. Lots of concerns in the very beginning, but feeling like the kids are able to address some of those rigors. And flooding. Sue has been a big factor in getting this going next year, making sure that the scheduling works properly for the AIS teachers. Flooding simply, we're taking, I shouldn't say simply because it's pretty complicated, very complicated, taking all of the AIS teachers and moving them right into a grade level at a particular time of the day and just addressing the needs. Moving on to another grade level, addressing the needs all throughout the day. So it's a positive change, I think. I'm looking at this as a really good thing, and I think the teachers are all feeling very good about it too. Data analysis, the implementation of interim assessments, which is something that hopefully through the DDI camp this summer, we hope everybody address as well as ourselves. The interim assessments will provide us with another tool. At this point even, I had this conversation with a 5th grade teacher today. We don't have a lot of methods to collect data on students in math at this point to help identify if they have some concerns in areas of weakness. You can see as a classroom teacher, but what exactly are their needs and how do we get them to help? At this point, what we have is STAR Math, which doesn't really address the up-and-coming Common Core standards. It's a good tool, but it's not everything. And we have classroom averages. So hopefully with the interim assessments, which will be given intermittently throughout the year, it'll provide another tool for those teachers to use to help address some of those needs. And strengthening grade level meetings. In strengthening the grade level meetings, my recommendation would be to focus on analysis and interpretation of that data in order to make the changes in the curriculum, make the changes in the program, any modifications that need to be done. Whether that's, and actually Ms. Kelly and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, whether it's a couple times a month that a grade level is able to sit down with the AIS teachers during a grade level meeting, address all of the most recent testing that's been done, students that may be concerns, and be able to talk and make those changes in the curriculum. And finally, continue to strengthen the foundation of strategy review. Different districts call this different things, but strategy review is actually an incredible opportunity for teachers to talk about how we can help address the particular needs of the student. And quite frequently, when you put 5 or 6 heads together, you can come up with slight modifications that will keep a child from potentially going to CSE if they don't need to go. So it's earlier intervention, that's the hope, and it's addressing those needs. So that would be probably of all the things up there. If I had to pick two that I would say would be strong points for us to continue to implement, exception transitional first, I think that's a good one. I would say probably to strengthen the grade level meetings. I think that's important that we're taking a look at that documentation, that we're working together as a team, because I really feel strongly that our elementary teachers and our AIS teachers can work well together, do work well together, and are ready to make changes. Everybody wants to see Edwards Knox in a different place. When you look at that document that puts us down here, there isn't a single one of us that doesn't want to see the best for our kids and see that on the rise. How do you do it? Through some of these things, I think, as well as others, but focusing, I think, on improvement. And some of the simple things that we're already maybe doing, that we can do a little more of. So on that note,
Okay.
That's it.
yeah,
Minute.
questions?
When I look at this Edwards Knox, the math three program, the
Yes.
math three page, and I see Herman DeKalb at 40, second from the top, and I see us last. I know we have meetings, we have studies, we have talks, but has anybody ever gone over and observed their program and see what they're doing to get to 40 and what we're not doing?
And that's a good question, and I can't answer that, whether people have gone to Herman to observe.
Well, I'm just thinking that that's
Yeah.
basically the economics, the population of the school. I'm not exactly familiar with how big that is, but
Right,
it's our neighbors.
yes.
So I just wondered if anybody had an explanation.
I think that part of our partnership that we're building with area schools will help to foster some of that, sharing back and forth between the districts, Lynn. So if there are, concepts or ideas that they're using, I'm hoping that again will be part of what we see when we get together to work on some of this DEI and even the scoring partnerships that we created.
Well, I didn't want to compare it against Messina for population wise,
Right.
but to the next door neighbors, the same demographics. So,
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I think that's what's frustrating, even as teachers, when we sit back and we look at the data and it comes back and we know, and we believe in our kids, and that's and you're always asking yourself, what can I do differently to address it? I feel that even though, and I'll be honest, even though I had concerns when I was implementing the Common Core ELA at 6th grade, and I really feel that vertically aligning our curriculum and increasing the rigor is going to be telltale.
Did the teachers review the data too?
Not yet, but I plan to share it.
I'd be interested to do the action. And,
No, they did, this is,
Not this way, I haven't shared it.
Chesney, but this is the same data we got last year, it's just now in the New York State report card that just came out, because it's always a year behind. So I
Oh,
had
I know
asked,
where this
I
is.
so we have already
I thought
discussed
this was
these
one
now.
just,
Oh, no, this, and that's why I kind of said it, so we've already seen this and kicked ourselves in the teeth over it.
so is this what we looked at last year?
Not last year,
Would have been your prior.
this fall, when we got our statistics back, that's this.
Okay,
But
okay,
the New York State report card always reports 1 year back.
so this isn't based on this year's?
No,
No.
we haven't
Okay.
seen this
We
year.
haven't gotten that
Thank
yet.
you.
Right.
Okay.
I can see your cognitive one's high in grade 3 in math, but as you go through the thing, other classes are below us and are even with us. And they might have some exceptional classes here. Herman DeKalb, the same thing, they're below us in certain areas. I think until we see the results from this year and our second graders, first graders, and kindergartners, do we see the results there?
See what the trends are. Do you understand what, I mean, you talk about looking at data and making course correction. Do we understand what the key performance indicators are that we're looking for?
Right.
Do we know what we're looking for? When we start looking at,
Well, that can bring us into
Yes.
this summer, when all the staff are going to the DDI data driven instruction for 3 days. So each staff will be going 3 days this summer to forge further into this.
because I mean, everything you're saying
Yeah.
makes sense, but do we really understand what the drivers are? Do the teachers drive drive this? Does the, I mean,
Well, I think a well-run classroom, the teachers drive it. But
Instruction strategies.
sometimes,
Strategies.
there are constraints involved in that position, so I think sometimes, it's more than just one person that needs to be responsible for all of those factors.
and how do you do it? Because I think it's very important to do this without stressing out the kids.
And
You know, I mean, the teachers are gonna get stressed to a certain point, but how does,
They're already there.
but their stress translates to the kids
Mhm.
very quickly and easily. So how do you do it without doing that, because that just is.
That's, I think, again, I know it probably sounds like a broken record, but probably one of the positive aspects that have come out, all the changes that we've seen in the last couple of years, is this last piece that we're really pushing for next year, which is the DEI. It's really taking those tools and putting them to good use, taking a look, having the interim assessment. So the physics teacher at Clifton Fine gets together with Harrisville and EK, and they get together and they create an assessment, and they all sit down and look at it. What standards did they miss? What do we need to reteach? So I feel like that's going to address some of those issues, Randy, that you're talking about, those indicators. We just correlate that in the standard. What standard, where are we falling down? What standard are our students not getting?
the one nice thing that the modules have done, like the ELA math, or the math modules, and I can speak about sixth grade because I was looking at this one not too long ago, is they do address what percentage of the Common Core test is going to be based on fractions or based on these particular skills. So the teachers are aware of which standards are going to be the most focused on. And I think to answer your question too, Randy, about that whole, this was implemented so quickly that it was stressful for everybody.
Yeah, we
And-
don't talk about that.
yeah, and as much as we try to get that across to the kids and have them understand that, it's still the increased rigor that is going to be a challenge for everybody, at least until we've been through this for a couple of years. And I know, for instance, at the sixth grade level, I'm thinking that those kids were just placed right into that Common Core, increased rigor through the math and the ELA modules, without any real preparation for that change, and the teachers were too. I mean, we had talked through the network meetings, and we were prepared ourselves in that way, but I don't think any of us were really prepared for the extent of the complexity of it.
What makes
Hopefully it gets
Constance-
easier.
What makes Constance so successful in this?
That's a good question.
Is it because other
Well,
parents, teachers, professors?
I would assume their demographics of the population that are there are certainly
Yes.
very, very different from what we have in our district.
Yeah,
So that would be one major contributor.
because, I mean, because,
But still, kids are kids, that's right.
well,
They're all
the kids are
capable.
kids, and then they learn, from the teachers, but the spread is so significant. I mean, it's not like everybody's, like, I mean, it's significant spread.
It is.
It's not just a little bit.
By the time our kids all get to high school, that spread's not there.
It isn't, and I think that's, our kids come into our building, we can make excuses. I mean, there's no, I think we just truthfully have to look at our population, and just, like Amy was saying, I mean, and you're right on. Those children, and that's the greatest thing about having a pre-K program, is they're in here and they're already addressing a lot of the academic needs. And as we move up through, you look at the data, and overall, there's gains as they move throughout. And you'll talk more about the high school end of it, but it takes our kids a little bit more time.
I think so.
Hopefully we push that gap a little bit.
Does anybody know the number of students, like per se, Potsdam, that doesn't start their kids in seventh grade or till their second versus preschool? And has anybody ever crunched the statistics of these? I've seen kids' homework that were, preschool, and if you wait till the kid is actually in seventh grade, you throw them in there, and especially if the parents don't sit down and do a lot of work with them, that poor guy's behind the eight ball for a long time.
Sounds like you got a plan.
Strategies, yes. And we have a lot of good things in place.
What's the results
This year, it's the same
The
thing.
teachers are gonna look at those results.
We're seeing results
Yes.
from these,
Yes.
Improvement.
It was a
It's
K.
trial and error.
Yes, this year was.
Teachers realize what I've done.
but it's similar to this two.
The DDI, no, not at all. totally different.
I'm not sure.
DDI is mandatory training built by the state that we have to do, which we're doing it in our own way.
Well,
Construction is totally different.
Is EDI gonna take place here,
It is,
all just our teachers?
all K through 12 are invited from Clifton Fine and Harrisville EK. And it's, yes, it's being housed here.
But it's mandatory that you come to both ends.
No, it's not, because it's, the training's in the summer. So we're just hoping that people will, have the ability, the flexibility in their schedule. And if they can't attend in the summer, there'll be a catch-up period at the beginning of the school year.
They already know the dates.
Oh, they've known the date since December.
And we've actually had really good numbers. We've had, I think in the elementary end, we've been 18 or 19 people at this point that have committed to those 3 days in August, which is,
Seems like
Significant.
that's their career, and, it's a mandatory thing,
It would be
I
interesting.
strongly
Yeah.
try to do
Well, I don't think every district is turning it into the same elaborate plan that we have in place. Many districts, I think, are moving forward with DDI, but, very few districts are really, I think, kind of going full force with the 3-day camp and pulling in as many experts as we can. So I think that's a great thing for those of us that are involved in that we're really, again, taking this piece very seriously, because this is by far the one piece that will have the largest impact on the students.
and I assume they're being paid
Yes,
if they attend.
yes.
it's the collaboration that you can gain working with the other districts and teachers at your level, rather than, and I shouldn't say it's not enough, but when there might only be one person, like a 6th grade with the ELA, who do they have to work with? So the opportunity to pull 4 districts together and have those other 3 people to throw ideas on is definitely advantageous. So, and I think that everybody is very ready to collaborate and work as a team, and wanting to see gains in progress in the students' results. Is there a question?
Well, I was just wondering, when we go to look at the effectiveness of the teachers of 10 based on, may not a completely fair comparison, but outcomes and test scores, who attended, if it made a significant impact or didn't, although everybody learns differently, including teachers learn differently.
Well, and again, back to that, what population do you have? But again, I think the movement as far as analysis of data is really kind of just beginning in the last couple of years, taking it, again, it's, many teachers have been doing it, but now they're, delving much deeper into that same concept. So I think that we're all learning at the same time, and we're moving forward with it. So I think there will be many of those conversations that will come out of that.
And not to draw any preconceived notions or predetermined destinies, but has our lack of consistent leadership affected our ability to roll these programs up consistently with the teachers and students? I mean, we got turnover in high school principals, turnover in elementary principals. Like you said, and we've all seen it, we haven't had consistent principals here 3-4 years.
Well, a lot longer than that.
As far as, like, for the elementary, because before I came, there were 5 principals in 7 years.
Has the messaging been consistent and the program's been consistent enough where you can actually see if it's trending or,
The problem with that, Randy, is that, and Laura kind of mentioned this, for example, when we used the math, when she was talking about Saxon math. For a while, when we were using Saxon, we were on the top of the charts for like 3 years, and we were like, yes, this is great, it's working, it's consistent, because we were using it right through the elementary. Well, as soon as the test changed a little, we can't keep using Saxon math, so then we plummeted back down again. And between the test changing and now Common Core changing, you just keep having all these, different ways or modes of doing things that, I don't know if we want to say not keeping up with it, and other districts are, but it's definite that, we need to make better practices than what we're doing.
Well, some of the things are changing. It keeps, the math programs and this program. What about the Common Core? Is that gonna be around? Because the state ed.
They say it is,
Basically
but,
wanted to hand this hat and send Monroe, so.
right. It's one of those things, how do you know? I mean, education's a bandwagon, you jump on it for a few years, then something else goes, and it's always a circle, and everything comes back. I hate to say that, but it's really
No,
true
that's
after 30
pretty
years.
much,
I mean, we used to call DEI task analysis, So it's, you know, it's not like we've never done this before.
Exactly.
But
Why
now
can't
we're,
Why can't we get it right after all these years? I was on the board 20 years ago. We're doing the same things we're doing now. The teachers are coming in saying, well, we're trying this, we're trying this. There's got to be some method that we can just get on and stick to. New compact for learning and no child left behind and all this.
Well, that's all facts, but,
if
you know,
things
the point
that
is,
keep
they change.
changing.
We can figure out what the game is, they change.
Well, no, we have Common Core. I mean, there's going to be something new in a few years. How can anybody settle down and learn how to teach, much less learn how to learn?
You teach first, second, and third grade, when you go through them three grades, Common Core, and then they switch them all to something in fourth grade,
Yeah.
you know, you're gonna be lost.
To learn to read and write is easy.
It's like any other industry, you never have the opportunity to step back and say, ooh, we made it, because you never do. It's always changing, it's constantly changing. You know, Bill Gates and those guys never sat back and said, there, we're there. They never were there. They were always, it was always the next thing. And if you weren't the innovator, you were the follower. And you better be the innovator.
I agree.
So, yes, and I'm gonna move out of the way before you start. No, that's how everybody, I did her a favor by not putting any butterflies
Right.
into the PowerPoint, so I'll move.
First, we were just gonna use this, then it was a PowerPoint, then it was a PowerPoint with animation. So, first of all, I just want to point out, this, if you were to go to the school report card, type in New York State school report card, and you finally get to the site, you type in Efforts Max, it's gonna give you some options, so this is what it would look like. So I'm just gonna say, check all, and then we're gonna build. I'm gonna come back, because I'll show you a little bit of what I want to look at. So it's gonna build this, I'll come over here since I'm short. And it's gonna give you all sorts of demographics, population, statistics. It's gonna talk to you about students with disabilities, about different ethnic groups, you know, attendance, suspensions, teacher turnover rate, teacher qualifications. There's all sorts of information in here, all right? One of the things that we've already talked about that I'm not talking about tonight is the data that Laura's talked with you. I know in August, that's when we had a very long presentation about our results from last year. So I don't want to talk to you about that tonight. But I do want to point out to you, if you scroll down through here, eventually you're going to come into that same, this is some of the same data that Laura has shared with you tonight, where it talks about how did we do against the state. One of the things I, again, want to make sure everyone understands this. This was last year's data. And notice the difference between these results, just if we're looking at the third grade maybe math or something up here. Again, it's apples to oranges, the test changed. So in order for us, unfortunately, to go back and start looking at data in our history to try to maybe make some sense of what's going on, it's very difficult to do because the test has changed in 3-8. So that's one of the complexities that we're faced with, is how to do this background check on why is this district doing so much better. And again, it's hard to do that as the test continues to change. So this is where all of the data would be that we reported in on in August of last year. It certainly didn't look like this because it wasn't in the school report card format. So if I scroll down long enough, let me come over to the side. We'll start to get into some of the high school data. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is what I think is something that you should know. No, yeah, you can sit here with them, sure. Let me just get up to where I want to be here. So, accountability. Animation.
I did not have that, and so you did. I did
So,
not have it.
Why are we talking, first of all, New York State school report cards, why are we getting them? There's an accountability issue here, right? New York State is sharing this information with the community, with the parents, with the school boards, and it's all part of, again, NCLB, that No Child Left Behind. We need to make sure that we are proficient in a certain number of areas. In the high school end, what are we looking at? We're looking at ELA, math, and then there's this third indicator. The third indicator at the high school level is the graduation rate. If school districts meet something called an adequate yearly progress, AYP, all right, we're left with good standing, which our district in the high school has been in that situation in the past. I looked through our last 4 years of school report cards, we always meet AYP, every time in every category, except this year. The law specifies, first of all, that if you don't meet AYP, there's some categories that you may fall into. If you don't meet AYP and you are at the very bottom of the bin, you're at 5% of the entire state, you're going to be a priority district, which means there's going to be all sorts of experts coming into the building, creating plans, you need to follow these strategies. If you're above that, if you're in the bottom 10%, then you're a focus district. If you're above that, then you have to create what is called a local assistance plan, a LAP plan. And then, of course, this is where the high school's been, or last forever, good standing. So, New York State gets its data from the school districts, from the test results, they put it together in a school report card, they take a look at the data, and they determine, how's the school doing? They set the bar, they set the benchmark. Some of the terms that you need to know that we're going to talk about tonight, first one is performance index. This is a mathematical formula that they use to determine basically how is their school performing. They use our data to say, okay, this is that school's score on specific tests. There's the equation right there. Looks like a lot of fun. So that's performance index. That's how we're doing. The EAMO, the effective annual measurable objective, is a value that the state sets. They set this benchmark. They say this is where, based on your population, this is where you should fall. The bottom one is the safe harbor. So generally, you want, if the state's saying this is where the state's setting the value, the EAMO, this is what we're getting for a score, called the performance index, we want these to be the same, or we would prefer that the performance index is higher. Well, if it's not, sometimes you may have to fall into the safe harbor. They've got a little range there, a little cushion for you to fall into. So those are the three terms we need to know. Performance index, effective annual measurable objective, and safe harbor. For the high school, the categories that we need to talk about tonight is ELA. Remember, there were three indicators: ELA, math, graduation rates. For the first time since I could see, we did not meet our adequate yearly progress for English. And I look back through the 4 to 5 years of data, we always met AYP. We did not meet AYP. Now, this score value is based on the Regions 11 results from last year's seniors. So the kids that graduated last year, which they're out of the building, we can't do anything with them now, right? We've done what we can. How did they do when they were 11th graders on the Regions? This was 2011, 2012, just again to give you so you can see how the data can change. Here's the number of students. By the way, they split it into categories. There are many more categories in this as far as ethnicity. I took out what we had. How many students took it? Here's again, performance index. This is our value, using that equation. The EAMO, this is what the state says we should be scoring at. And here's the safe harbor target that the state also sets. This category here is the one I'm concerned with. We had 29 12th graders. They're using it, they're, again, last year's graduating class that took the English 11 Regions. Our performance index was only a 148. The state said it should have been a 151. We didn't make it. We didn't get it. If I come down, then I start to look at, well, if I want to talk about maybe just the white population in the building, there were 28 students. Our performance index would have been a 150. They said we should be scoring at a 164. We didn't do it. Now, when we come down to the last category, we're going to talk about the economically disadvantaged. Notice the check mark. We made it in that category, but that's not good enough. You need to make it in all of these categories. If there's a dash, there's not enough data. Right, so that's where you're going to see some of these areas. There are some other issues that come along with this. Again, has to do with population. If you have less than 30 students, it somewhat impacts your population. These asterisks right here, what they have to do is they then take data from the previous cohort, the previous class, and combine them to come up with some of these values. Because, as you know, the smaller the amount of data you have, one score is going to skew everything. This is an extremely small class. All right, so a couple of students did very poorly. That's definitely going to throw our data off. So that's English.
Joe, stand up first. All students 36, 156, and then it goes down to white, which is the same number of students. Why does it change?
Okay, right.
You're looking at 2 years, right?
2011,
says 36.
Yep.
All white students have the lowest 36.
Yep.
The PI is, why is the EAML changed?
Why did these values change? This again is all students of all categories, of all minorities, and as well as economically disadvantaged. So as you come down through here, depending on the number of students that you have in each category, and of course in our area, we're generally higher percentage of students that would be white, economically disadvantaged, or students with disabilities. For each of these categories, there's different values that are associated with them. Okay, so generally also, if you're a white student in this building, in this district, notice the value is much higher than if it were for all students. This is a concern. If you don't make AYP in 2 years, so again, this happens again next year, we could be one of the priority districts, a focus district, or we may have to come up with a lab. That's definitely something that we need, we're gonna need to be looking for.
So we won't know for another year.
We won't know for another year, but
And that's what currently this year we are doing a lab for our elementary special ed students. Because we didn't make from the end.
We're doing that unsolicited.
No.
We have to do
We
it.
had to do
Oh,
it. It's not a choice.
that didn't make it 2 years in a row yet.
if you do it 2 years in a row,
That's for high school, I was talking about elementary.
Oh, okay, I'm okay.
So we're at the end of our lab
Okay.
plan, this year I quit.
Yep, ready? So, next category is math. 3 indicators, math, English, graduation. Notice, last year, 2012, or 2011-2012, again, the class graduated 2 years ago, they made AYP. This year, did not make AYP. Again, last year's seniors, when they took the algebra regents in 9th grade, that data is then collated, compared. We had 29 students. The performance index of that group, so our score was 136. It needs to be a 130. That's good. But then when we come down to our population of white students, 28 students, performance index 139, it needed to be 146. We didn't meet AYP.
Just be one student difference.
Again, so we've got that small class that went through last year, one of the smallest classes we've ever had. And it's not that they were a weak class necessarily, but again, just a few data can really change things for us. So down here on the bottom, if we look at economically disadvantaged students, there were 19 that would fall in that category. They needed to have a score of 130. Their target was 107, surpassed that by quite a bit. State Harbor target? Yes, so if you have, good question, that's why I said, like, what, a 20? So if you have a very, very low population, when it falls into one of these economically disadvantaged categories, if they compare this population, because it's under 30, and the previous year's population, and it's still so small, they can't give you a good comparison, your target's only 20. Yes, so, I mean, we're fine, but that seems a little unusual in comparison to the rest of the data, I agree. So this is, I'm concerned about this, obviously, and I want you to know about it.
Why does our state separate the races of students?
It's not kind of profile.
Well,
Our profile should be all students, it
Yeah.
shouldn't have anything to do with just because it's one white kid or one Mexican or.
Statistically proven.
that,
Yeah.
right.
Well, why separate out the whites?
Well, if we had minority students, because they asked Asian Pacific, they asked Mexican and Spanish.
Right, there's a long
We
list.
would have that if we had those students, but we don't.
And you have to make it for all 3 categories.
Yes.
So all categories.
Right. Any place that you've got without a dash,
That's,
you need to have a
that's
dash.
their economic disadvantage.
They
There's
identify,
also special ed as a criteria.
they identify female and male as well. So you can actually take a look at the data over time and identify whether or not females are doing well in math versus males at a particular grade level, or when that starts to change, if it does change, and maybe then other things need to be looked at within the school. But they separate these out in a lot of ways.
Okay. Next slide, please. Graduation rate, notice last year, 2001, 2012, all the checks, that means we made adequate yearly progress. Last year's, in this case, we did make AYP despite the fact, oh, sorry, that was my mistake, that should have been checked. That should have been checked. Our graduation rate is 83%, state target's 80. Doesn't matter what your district looks looks like the state target for graduation is 80%. So as long as we keep that above 80%, we're good. So again, this was my mistake. So we're okay with graduation rate, but again, as I look back through the data, I think this is an anomaly. This is not typical, this is an extremely small class again. And you're gonna notice, again, numbers fluctuate, it looks a little unusual because we're back at 40s and 20s. But as students come in and out of the district, remember, we're also measured by students who might be in the district for 1 year, then leave. So that will also cause some of this data to look unusual.
It says 4-year graduation rate. Is that a rolling average or something?
It is, and they also have, I didn't put it up here, Randy, but they also have a 5-year. Because again, recognizing that some students might take 5 years to graduate, this is where their focus is. How many students are graduating in 4 years? You know, it should be at 80%.
Well, how many are graduating, and it takes 4 years to graduate?
Right.
I see.
Yes, start in 9th grade, you know, about by 4 years later, you should be graduating.
Oh,
You should be graduating 80%.
80%.
State average would be 80%.
80%.
Within 4 years.
Yes,
Next year, that shows up as a drop.
Okay.
right. They have a 5-year, but again, it's not, I mean, not that some of our students aren't doing that, but it's just, doesn't seem to be targeted like this. So what do I need to do? Obviously, again, we need to continue to look at the curriculum. The unfortunate situation here is now we're getting the data, and again, the students have graduated. So is this, as I'm hoping, an anomaly? Since if I look at our, historically look at our data, we haven't ever been in this situation in high school before. I think that it is. I could be wrong. But I think, again, it's an extremely, extremely small class, and a few outliers could really change where our data ended up, where our performance index ended up. So, but we're going to continue to do the same things that we're always doing. Work on curriculum, work with teachers to reflect and refine those resources, continue to drive with professional development, add data analysis in. Again, celebrate achievements. There are, despite the fact that I unfortunately just chose to show you the stuff, you know, the AYP, there are certainly things that we're doing well at in high school, and I will continue to, you know, cheer and shout that to the roof. I do think that having a stronger look, or having a look at data with teachers is important. Some of that same data that you were using, I've used that with them before, but we just took a look at it again in our last faculty meeting. And I asked them to pick targets. Where do you see your students fitting? How many students should be getting a level 4? How many students should be getting an 85 or above? To try to encourage them to take a look at some of the same data that we've been looking at all year to see what should our targets be? Where should we fall? And to not necessarily have me say, this is what I'd like to see. I want to know what they would like to see. What do they think is reasonable? So I really hope, again, I think this is a big piece for us. Not just us, but the entire system of education as far as what we're doing with this. It's by far, in my teaching career, been the most emphasis ever placed on taking a look at data. In the classroom, you know, you're grading quizzes, you're taking a look at it, oh my gosh, some kids missed question number 7, you immediately address that. But now we're doing it on a much larger scale, not just within our own little, you know, utopian society in our classroom. It's going to involve peers and coworkers getting involved with that. Questions? So AYP, adequate yearly progress, that's not just, by the way, for the high school. There's all sorts of data that goes along with the elementary and the middle school as well. But the high school, that was something new for us.
Does the state know that, when did they look at the low totals, you're saying most of this issue was because of last year's small graduating class? Do they give you a free pass based on 1 year of small population?
Yeah, I'm going to say no to that, but in a sense, yes, because if you do this 2 years in a row, don't make AYP, then we're probably going to end up with a lab if that happens again.
How big is this class this year?
46, yeah, it's
It
mid-40s,
was
I think.
30, you said last year?
Mhm. They were a very, very, very small class. It was, I think, the smallest class we possibly had since NK started, as it became NK.
If you fail following this twice, you said we're in trouble.
We're in trouble, meaning we're going to have to go through the lab. We're going to either be a focus district or priority district. I don't think we're going to be a focus district because we're close.
Does the state send you any money to help you to,
No.
or any people to help you, or they just say you're that?
If you became a focus school, yes, you would end up getting more monies. which in some ways is positive that you would be able to do some of the things. We're in our lab plan right now that we're doing in our quick through the elementary. I mean, staff have to have more professional development, more trainings, we're having a lot more meetings. There's no more funding for it. I mean, so we're picking up the cost.
You know, in my conversations with BOCES, you know, Canton, you know, there's districts that are in our area that are focus districts that have landed in those categories.
For several years.
Right, so hopefully, you know, as long as it doesn't happen 2 years in a row, it's not an issue, but I wanted you to see that's some of the data that we look at that isn't necessarily, you know, you might look through and scroll through that and not notice that, but that's something that's important.
And when will this, write-up for this year come out?
Next spring.
Next spring?
Yeah, we won't get next year's until the beginning of June again.
That's our state.
How
And then what do our-
much do you think makes a difference as far as replacing, like, what Randy pointed out, we've had principals and principal change. How much do you think that has a bearing on?
I personally think it makes a big difference. Even, I mean, and I'm not trying to say anything like for the 5 years I was elementary principal, when Ron came in and had to make some different changes. And I think then teachers get disillusioned, well, we just changed to this, we just changed to that, and then people
Well,
start
sometimes
doing
it's
things
like,
more their own
we're going this way,
process.
and we wanna go this way, and that isn't always what we receive,
Right.
so.
And I think now having a literacy coach has made a difference for some consistency, no matter who the principal is. We haven't had that luxury before, which is why, one of the reasons I wanted to keep that in the budget.
High staff turnover rate obviously impacts everyone in the building, especially the students. And, you know, not just in administrative positions, but even as retirements occur.
You guys, we choose.
Are we high staff turnover as far as staff?
We're high staff
Medium.
turnover in general.
Right now, I think we're kind of going through, I mean, there's some retirements that are starting to
It's normal.
sort of fall our way, you know, it does seem like sometimes those are in groups, but generally,
Well, sometimes you take one out of the equation, and put somebody else new into the equation, it changes the whole